You're listening to The Support Report with Be Present, where we share real stories from young adults and how support changed their lives.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into another episode of The Support Report. We are Be Present. I am your host, Justin Peters, and joining me today is Matthew Ode, stage 3 testicular cancer survivor. Matt, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you so much, Justin. Crazy excited to be on here, share my story, and just give as much value as I can to your audience today. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm excited to explore your story a little bit. So let's kick things off with a monumental date for you. And surprisingly, it's not the day you were diagnosed with cancer, March 17th, 2016. Tell me what happened that day.
Yeah, you did a little research. I love it. Yeah, very important day, actually. So it was St. Patrick's Day, and at the time I was 24 years old, personal trainer, super healthy, just went out that night. And that was actually the day that I met my girlfriend, and her name was Lauren. We kind of just were at the bar, we were talking. And, within a couple of weeks, I got her phone number that night. Within a couple of weeks, we were, doing more activities, things like that. Within a month, we started dating. And, there's a big reason why I start off with that date, and we'll get to that later on, for a lot of reasons. And, as the, springtime and summer progressed, we were dating, we started doing all of these summer activities together. We were hiking, going kayaking, you name it. And all of a sudden, I really started to notice these minor back pains. And, 24 years old, you don't really think anything of it. I'm lifting all the time. And I'm just thinking it has to do with soreness. And then all of a sudden just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I was just being extremely stubborn about it. I wouldn't go to the doctor. I wouldn't get it treated. I'd always just say, I'll fight through it. I'll be fine. And about 2.5 months later, after, we started dating, so it's August now, actually. I'm over at Lauren's house, and all of a sudden I just start puking up blood. And, I remember Lauren seeing me, and she's like, we need to get you to a hospital. So they eventually get me to the hospital. They do a blood test on me, and they find out that I had lost 2/3 of the blood circulating in my body. They don't know why. Immediately they gave me 6 bags of blood, and they rushed me into the emergency room to figure out what's going on. So the next morning, I wake up, and I'm in the recovery room thinking it's over. I'm thinking, I'm ready to go home. I'm feeling better, whatnot. And all of a sudden, my surgeon, my doctor walks in, and he just has this blank stare in his eyes. And, right then I knew something was dead wrong. So he came over to me, basically sat down with me, grabbed my hand, and he told me, we found an 11-centimeter tumor in your small intestine. We believe it is cancerous, and we have to rush you to the main campus of the Cleveland Clinic immediately. So I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and the Cleveland Clinic, thank God, is one of the top hospitals in the world, pretty much. So, they rushed me there. And at the time, it was just my parents. So Lauren didn't know. None of my friends knew. And I just remember looking over my parents when I received the news, and they were crying. And the only thing I could think of, as crazy as it sounds, I wasn't scared, but I was like, how am I going to be strong for my parents? How am I going to be strong for Lauren when I have to give her this news, or my friends? The only thing that I was nervous about was, is Lauren still going to be with me after this? Because we'd only been dating for about 2 to 2.5 months at this time. So I didn't want to put this burden on her. And I felt like, this is a lot to put on somebody who barely even knows me, and we're just getting into a relationship. So, I get rushed to the Cleveland Clinic, and they do a bunch of tests on me, and that's where they find out that I had stage 3C testicular cancer. And that's where my parents started telling everybody. People started flooding in, and eventually Lauren arrived. And I just remember before she arrived, I had a lot of people coming in already, and she already knew the news from my parents telling her, but I was like emotionless, I would say. I didn't really have any emotions. I think I was still in shock, but as soon as she arrived, I just broke down, and I was scared, but I was also like, I need somebody, that's going to be my rock throughout this. And she didn't falter one bit. I just remember us hugging, crying, and I knew right then and there that she was going to be my rock throughout this entire journey. So,
what did that first conversation with Lauren sound like? Outside
yes.
of, the first intimate one-on-one conversation. You said you were scared that, is she got to stay with me? You guys have been together for 2.5 months at that time. Such a young relationship for like this colossal event to happen. And she probably has other things to do. And maybe she didn't know what she had signed up for at that moment. And you'll definitely tell us a little bit more about that journey. But she put in a lot of hours in the hospital there forward. What did the conversation look like? Was it, I'm going to be with you through thick and thin, or did you release her from that moment and just say, hey,
at first we didn't even say a word. We just like, it was almost like this crazy like eye connection, an emotional connection at first. So the first thing we did when we saw each other, we didn't say anything, and I just remember like hugging each other and just crying for like a good, I don't know, minute or so. And then, as the hours progressed, I think that I didn't ask her, are you going to be with me or any of that. It was more or less, she asked me questions of like, hey, what do you know what the next step is? She's like my father, where she loves knowing the information. I don't need to know all the information. That's just going to stress me out more. But for her, for my dad, and same with my mom, me and my mom don't really need to know everything, but my dad and Lauren do. And that's good. I love that we had two separate areas, and all she wanted to do was to gain as much knowledge about the situation as possible. So right there was kind of like an indicator that I already knew she was all in. Like she was in. She wasn't gonna falter. She stayed with me. She slept with me in. For the first 6 days, for the first little over a week, I had to stay in the hospital because they put me on my first round of chemotherapy, and they didn't want me to go home yet. And then when I went home, she stayed with me pretty much every day as well. So that was a really big indicator of like, we didn't have to say anything. I just knew she was going to be there. And gosh,
what was both your family and yours experience with cancer before that, and Lauren's experience with cancer? Had either of you been affected by cancer directly throughout your life?
Very minor. My grandfather did get diagnosed with cancer. It had nothing to do with testicular cancer. I believe it was prostate, but besides that, there might have been some other people, but my knowledge on it, zero. My father's knowledge on it, very little. Lauren's knowledge, pretty much zero. Like nobody was really like truly affected by cancer. So it was kind of just like a total switch. Like I go from like the healthiest I've ever been in May of 2016 to now diagnosed with cancer, fighting for my life in August of 2016. And it was just crazy. It was just like a whirlwind. But I always say that, like, when things come on to you so unexpectedly, that's where you really gain a lot of the knowledge. That's where it's like it's a survival. Like you either you go one way or you go the other. So I had no choice but to, I obviously learned a lot, but I didn't need to know every single little detail like my parents did. So that's kind of how it went.
So treatment wasn't so smooth for you. You had so many ups and downs throughout this next, 9 months, I believe. Take us through a couple of the highlights. You overcame multiple complications, a coma or two, actually, a near-death experience. Tell us about that journey a little bit.
Yeah. So with chemotherapy, they put me on 5 rounds of chemo, where each round consisted of about 2.5 weeks. And during that, I had one of the most mentally challenging times. And that is because literally right in the middle of my chemotherapy, I lost my 3-year-old puppy who was diagnosed with cancer about a year before me. And you know what it's like losing a pet and stuff like that. But for me, we were actually fighting this together. I took him to every one of his chemo sessions before I was diagnosed, and we slept together all the time. Like we were just like, I don't know how to explain it, man. It was just that. And to see him pass away so young, it broke me down mentally. Like so hard that I didn't want to go to chemo. I just started to give up on myself. And all of a sudden, like one day I woke up about 5 or 6 days later, and I was like, I remember looking and praying, and I just was like, is this what you want, like, from me, God? Is it to give up on myself? is this what Lauren would want? Is this what my parents, is this what Duke, my puppy at the time, would want from me? And I said, absolutely not. So what I did was I did one little thing every day. That day I decided to just get up off of that bed and go walk a little bit. Maybe it was go walk a quarter of a mile and come back. I mean, I was super weak. I lost my hair. Anybody who's gone through chemo, I went through very intense rounds. I lost my hair, I was super fatigued, nauseous all the time. I lost a lot of weight. I lost all the muscle that I had built for 5 to 7 years of training. All I kept telling myself was, what is one little thing that I can do every day to progress myself, to get myself to where I need to be? And I just kept putting one step in front of the other. I think it's a good lesson for a lot of people is if you're struggling right now, you don't need to do everything at once. All you need to do is put one foot in front of the other, and every single day say, how can I win the day by doing one simple thing that's going to progress me forward in life to my destination or to my goal that I want to reach. So my goal at the time was finishing chemo. And, 2 months later, I finished chemo. And it was amazing, man. It was like, I feel like I accomplished like Mount Everest at the time. I was like, I'm so ready for this next step. And,
And
so
this was
after
November?
that,
November of
this was
2016?
November.
Okay.
You got it. Yep. So it was August all the way to November 21st, I believe, was the last day of my chemotherapy. What had happened was they gave me a 2.5 to 3 week period before I went to see my oncologist again, because they wanted the chemotherapy to kind of settle its course. So when you're done with chemo, it takes a big toll on your body. So before they can do any surgery potentially or anything, and they need to kind of let the chemo get out of your body and your body start to recover. So 3 weeks goes by, and I sit down with my oncologist, and he basically sits down and he tells me, Matt, we have good news and we have bad news. And the good news is your tumor shrunk from 11 centimeters to 3 centimeters. Bad news is it's wrapped around what's called your inferior vena cava. Now, your inferior vena cava is a central vein that goes from the bottom of your upper body to your heart. And so we're going to have to do anywhere from a 10 to 12-hour surgery. We're going to have to get 4 different surgeons involved: a heart surgeon, a urologist, a couple other different types of surgeons involved. And we don't know what the complications are going to be. And, for those 2 weeks was probably the longest 2 weeks of my life. And, I thought that after that surgery, it was hopefully just going to be done and I'd be cancer free. And, little did I know it wasn't exactly, how it planned. So, so what had happened was I ended up getting the surgery, did end up being about 10 to 10.5 hours. And the crazy part is guess what? Right now that we're talking was the exact surgery date 4 years ago, January 6, 2017. Pretty crazy that we're talking right now about that. And I just posted on my Instagram, Facebook, everything about it. And so I get the 10.5 hour surgery done. And at the time it was about 140 pounds. Before that was about 185 pound personal trainer. So I lost about 45 pounds. Wake up and I can't move. I don't know what's going on, but I can't move. I have a breathing tube in my mouth. I have things in my nose, hooked up to all these wires. I can't move. And I remember looking down at my stomach, and they had to cut me open from my left hip to my right hip. And what had happened was when they ended up having to remove the vena cava. And when they did so, my body went into what's called compartment syndrome. So everything started to kind of shut down, not exactly right away, but what had happened was so much swelling occurred in my body that it was shutting things down in my, my kidney, my liver, things like that. And I remember waking up, and when I could finally walk, which took about 4 days, I had gained close to 60 pounds. It was almost 200 pounds. And a lot of it had to do with swelling all over my body. I was close to 200 pounds. I think I was like 190 something. And eventually, I remember talking to my doctor, and he said, hey, the fluid should drain out of your stomach, and it should eventually, you should be okay within a couple of weeks. So a week goes by, they released me from the hospital. I'm still in pain, and I'm still feeling like something is just definitely not right. Another week goes by, and all of a sudden the draining that's supposed to be coming out of my stomach just stops like that. I'm in so much pain that they rush me back to the emergency room. I'm put into an ambulance, and I'm rushed to the Cleveland Clinic. Right on the spot, they had to drain close to 7 liters of fluid out of my stomach. And that's what caused me, like I said, I went to compartment syndrome. I had complete kidney and liver failure. I had a cone drilled inside my head to relieve potential brain swelling. I had a catheter in my chest. I had a catheter in my neck because they thought I was going to be on dialysis the rest of my life. And like you said, lastly, I fell into a 2-week non-induced coma. So, um, you know, long story short, I mean, I'll go into detail because I know you probably want me to, but you know, if it's okay, I do want to talk a little bit about faith because it's such a big part of my journey. I have faith on anybody, you know, like I say, I don't push faith on anybody, but I'm going to share my experience because it's just been such a huge part of my life. And you know, when I was in that coma, you know, my parents and Lauren never left for 2 straight weeks. They stayed there and they never left. And we had people flooding in, coming in, praying for me, doing things. And my mom hosted prayer services. She hosted 3 of them. She hosted 3 prayer services where hundreds of people go to these churches and just pray for me. And literally in the middle of the last prayer service was the day that I woke up from my coma. And I woke up from my coma with Lauren holding my hand. That's how they found out that I woke up, was Lauren holding my hand. So what she would do is every day she would come up to me, she'd hold my hand, she'd say, Matt, wake up, or like Matt, or she'd pray for me or something like that. And that day in the middle of that prayer service, she was holding my hand. I don't know if she's praying or what she was doing, but she felt my hands. And this was with me making up. It wasn't like, oh, I woke up and can talk. No, it was me wiggling my fingers and opening, starting to like flutter my eyelids. She ran over to my parents, ran over to the doctor, said that I was awake. They didn't believe her at first, went over and they found out that I was starting to wake up. And, you know, it wasn't like rainbows and butterflies. I'll tell you that. It was a massive journey, you know, for a week. Once again, I couldn't move. I couldn't move my fingers this time. I mean, really all I could do is wiggle them. I couldn't move my hands up and down. I couldn't move my legs. And as the week progressed, I started to make a little bit of progress. So I took the breathing tube out of my mouth. They also said, hey, we're going to take out one of the catheters in your neck. And, you know, they kept the one in my chest. So as they're taking the catheter out of my neck, I end up going in, I have an irrhythm heartbeat, I end up going into cardiac arrest, and they have to do 8 minutes of CPR on me. And it caused me to go back into another 1-week coma. And, you know, that time, at this point, I'm in the ICU for close to a month. And I wake up, it's now Valentine's Day. So I was brought in sometime mid to late January. It's now Valentine's Day. I wake up from my coma and I just remember seeing, you know, like flowers everywhere, hearts and stuff. And Lauren was in the room. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm going to try and get up. I had no idea what was going on. No idea again. I was kind of in so many drugs, no idea what was happening. Try to get up, once again, can't move an inch. And I realized that I have to relearn to completely like walk again. And in a matter, it probably took about 2.5 weeks from laying in my bed to sitting up to then standing to then taking my first steps with 4 nurses every single day helping me. Took about 2.5 weeks to take my very first step again. And, you know, for me, at this point too, I want to just say that I had you know, 3 additional surgeries. So I had my major surgery and then I had 3 additional surgeries, all draining the fluid and whatever was going on in my small intestine and stuff like that, they had to take care of. So at this point, I'm 4 surgeries in, and every time I try to walk, I almost feel like I'm going to faint. And it's just super weird. I didn't know how to explain it. I didn't know what was going on. You know, it was really challenging for me, but eventually they're like, hey, we need to get you out of this ICU. And they get me out of the ICU and they put me into a recovery room. Sorry, excuse me. And, you know, as soon as I get into the recovery room, about 3 to 4 days, I'm making more progress. I'm like, hey, listen, we got to get you out of this recovery room and into your final stages of physical therapy. They were just really trying to get me into the final stages so they can get me out of this hospital. And I just knew something wasn't right, but I still said, okay. So as they're wheeling me, and not in a wheelchair, in my bed, to my final stages of physical therapy, I remember looking down at my stitches, and my stitches had popped open and my spleen was sticking out of my stomach. That had rushed me into a 5th major surgery where they couldn't close my skin back up. So they had to leave what's called an open wound, about the size of a football, where they could only put a mesh on my stomach. They had to take out all of my abdominals, and they basically had to save my life. So, you know, that day I woke up, as you tell, back in the ICU room, and this was a little scary, but really powerful. It was a big life-changing moment for me. I remember waking up, my hands were tied and my feet were tied to the bed because they didn't want me to touch my wound, because it was, they couldn't close it back up, and I could actually move at this point. And I remember I had a breathing tube in my mouth, and for 2 straight days, I couldn't get a hold of anybody. Nobody knew that I was actually awake at that point. So I just remember praying, and I remember that, like, if I wasn't in rock bottom before, I'm in rock bottom right now. I can't move. I'm back in the ICU room. I just had a life-changing surgery. And I remember praying to God, and I said, God, I have 2 options here. I can give up. I fought really hard. I can give up on my life, and I can, I can be done. Or I can say I'm in the lowest point of my life right now, and the only place I can go is up. And I want people to think about that. If you feel like you're in a rock bottom situation, mentally, physically, financially, relationship, whatever it is, just know that the only place you can go from there is up. And that's what I told myself. And this is what happened. 2 days, they released me, I say, from, my shackles, and they my hands were free, my legs were free, took out the breathing tube. And literally within 2 days, I walked further than I had ever done previous to the ICU room, previous to the, past ICU, the recovery room, everything. And I was out of the ICU room in like 4 to 5 days, out of the recovery room in like 3 days, and finally in my, last stages of physical therapy. And, with physical therapy, I had to learn to just do everything we take for granted, sitting on a toilet, getting up off of a bed, going 50 meters. That's it. Just walking 50 meters, all of these things. And eventually I was released from the hospital after around 53 days, around 53 days in the hospital. I was finally released. And the day that I was released was March 17th of 2017, exactly 1 year from when I met Lauren. And not only did Lauren stay with me when I was in my coma, but she stayed with me all 53 days in the hospital. And the only time she'd ever leave is she went to work. She had her birthday during that time. We spent her birthday. We had Valentine's Day. She had friends asking her, hey, let's go grab some lunch. No, she just stayed there. And most of the time, I would say for about 40 of the 53 days, I couldn't even talk. Couldn't have a conversation with her. And so did my parents. They never left my side, and I had amazing friends and family. But it just goes to show that, for me, I really feel like God put an angel in my life. And that's just such an important day for us, because not only was I released from the hospital that day, but, we met each other that day. And it was just like a day to really put things into perspective. And, being released from the hospital that day, it wasn't like rainbows and butterflies. I'll tell you that. For me, I dropped down all the way. Remember, I told you I was about 190 to close to 200 pounds. I dropped down to 110 pounds in a matter of 53 days from no food, couldn't have any food. This is another really challenging part. Barely any water. All they could do is give me what's called sponges to keep my mouth moist, because anytime I drink something, it would come right back up because of all the surgeries they were doing to my stomach. And so, that was extremely challenging, and that was the next step. I don't know if you want to ask anything right now, but I can kind of go on after that.
I have a few follow-up questions just on your treatment journey. And actually, let's start with identity, because you're starting to touch on this, and I know you're going to get into it a little bit, but you go from a fit personal trainer, 185 pounds, solid muscle. You're also a ginger, red hair. And you lose both of those. I mean, you lose what is probably 2 really big identity pieces to you in terms of being fit and having red hair. How did you think through the physical identity loss part, and what were you doing in order to compensate for some of that? Because I think this is something, especially young adults, through a time of their life where it really does mean a lot to them how they appear, what they look like. Losing, going through chemo and losing your hair for anyone is usually a really big challenge. So what would you say to those people?
Yeah, I have a really big saying that that's stuck with me my entire life, and that is, everything in life happens for you, not to you. And let me explain it real quick. We are going to, at some point in our life, every single person is going to get unfair, unexpected, challenging, news in their life, challenging situations, challenging scenarios. But it's not the scenario that you need to be worried about. It's how do you react to the scenario? How do you take that scenario and become a better version of yourself? Because I look at it this way: if you start looking at life as why is this happening to me, then everything starts to become an excuse. You start to blame other people. You start to blame the universe, start to blame God. You start to have a pity party, and it gets you absolutely nowhere. But then on the other end, you could have somebody with the same exact scenario who's lost hair, who's lost their body image, or just anything in life. And you can say, how is this happening for me? And what I mean by that is, how is this a lesson that I can learn from? How can I grow from this experience? How can I become a better version of myself, mentally, physically, and emotionally? And more importantly, how can I use it to impact the next person that's going through a similar situation as me? Mm. It sucked that I lost my hair. It sucked that I lost my body image that I worked so hard for. But me dwelling over it, blaming, God, having a pity party was gonna get me absolutely nowhere. So I told myself, listen, like, my hair's gonna grow back, number one, so I'll be okay. My body image, I can take control of. These are things I can take control of. Yeah, I'm dwindled to 110 pounds, look like a skeleton right now, but guess what? In 3 to 5 years, I can get right back to where I was with hard work and dedication. It was almost just like, how do I take the positive out of these situations and grow from them? And that's what I want to tell people. Anybody who's going through a challenging situation and feel like they've lost part of their identity, most of the time when I lose part of my identity, I gain a stronger, better new version of myself. When I lose a part of my identity, I'm telling you right now, it's almost either like a fresh start or an eye-opening experience of something that I could never have seen if I didn't let go a certain part of me. And I'm not saying that you need to lose your hair or lose your body image. What I'm saying is, when you get unexpected and unfair news, don't always look at it as a bad thing. Look at it as an opportunity to have a new perspective on life, to have a different type of gratification into your life and grow from it. We only grow, in my opinion, we really only grow through our failures, through our struggles. That's where most of the growth happens. Yeah, you can have a little bit of growth through success, but most of it is when you are down in the dirt and you have no option but to put your foot in the mud and keep pushing forward. Mm-hmm. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah. And what I love about your story too is the moments when you couldn't push yourself forward on your own, you did have a rock that was right next to you that was doing it for you. So after your 5th surgery, you're back home, you're 110 pounds or so. And what I've heard from the situation is you did start to have a little bit of a pity party. You lost some accountability with the nurses and people that were in the hospital. And Lauren luckily pulled you aside and had a conversation with you. And that seemed like a huge inflection point in your journey to recovery. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love it. You really do know a lot of my story. This is great. You do your research. So appreciate it. And, what had happened was when I did get out of the hospital, I didn't have the nurses to hold me accountable anymore. I didn't have the constant, every single day, somebody saying, hey, Matt, go do this, go do that. And for about a week and a half straight, maybe even 2 weeks, all I want to do is lay in my bed. You're right. I started to make excuses. And after those 2 weeks, I ended up back in the hospital for a week. I had a standing heart rate of 150 beats a minute. My blood pressure was through the roof. My temperature was at almost 105 degrees. And I took about 3 to 5 days to really get all my levels back down. And when I did, I remember coming home. And I was over at Lauren's house about a week later, and we basically sat down, and she told me, she said, listen, Matt, and this was a conversation I need to hear. If you don't take care of yourself, you will potentially not be here next month or in 6 months from now or a year from now. And it's not because of cancer, because at that time I was actually cancer free. It was because I'm not taking care of my body, and my body needed to recover and start healing itself. And I remember just crying. I was just crying for a good hour almost. And it was almost like I was flooded with this sense of new purpose. Like, I need to take care of myself. I need to get myself back together. And literally the next day I took a 180. I picked up a 5-pound dumbbell and I just started doing bicep curls. That's all I did that day. Literally all I did. You know what I did the next day? I did the exact same thing. And then eventually I progressed a little bit. Instead of walking 50 meters, I'd walk 60 meters. Instead of, eating a little bit unhealthy, I started to incorporate a little more healthy, or eating a little bit more food to start gaining some weight back. Little things every day. Just like I told you before, it's one little thing every day. How do you win the day? Because if you can win the day, you can win the week. If you can win the week, then you can win the month. If you can win the month, then you can win the year. And if you look back a year from now and you've won the day, the majority of your days, and you won the majority of your weeks and the majority of your months, I promise you, you are not going to be the same person you were back then. You're going to be such a better version of yourself. That's exactly what I had to do. But it was one thing. I had a vision, but I wasn't like, I have to get there tomorrow. That's the thing. So many people want instant gratification. I said, listen, this could take years to get to where I need to be again, especially back to where I was. And the problem was I don't have any abdominals anymore. I have this big lump on my stomach, this massive scar. So I said, listen, I'll technically never be what I was, but you know what I am going to do? I'm going to try to be the healthiest version I can. And just like you said too, I had to rely on my support. I had to rely on my support. I had to rely on my faith, and I had to rely on all of the hard work I'd put the previous 5 to 7 years into myself, and take all of that knowledge and apply it now. A lot of people, this is a kind of cool example for like people who, I'll just take an entrepreneur, for example, an entrepreneur who builds up a massive company and loses everything he built for 10 to 15 years. But then all of a sudden you see him build it back up in 1 to 2 years, and he's now making even more money than he did before. You want to know why he did it? It's because he invested in himself. And that's what I think is the most important investment you can ever make, because when you have the knowledge, that's why success is not overnight. It takes a lot of knowledge, takes a lot of time to really learn about yourself and learn what you need to do to progress yourself. And then if you fail, it's going to be a lot easier to pick yourself back up and keep pushing yourself forward. But a lot of times when people fail, they don't learn from it. Instead, like I told you, they start asking why everything happening to me. So I just kept pushing forward. I said, I'm done making excuses in my life, and I'm going to keep pushing myself forward. So within a couple months, I gained about 20 to 30 pounds. Within 6 months, I gained about probably 30 pounds back. So I was now back to about 140 pounds. And here's a really, really cool story. I ended up actually going back to my ICU, where, I was in for, 40 days, and I wanted to go visit all my ICU nurses, show them that, I'm strong now, I'm doing better, everything, I wasn't fully healthy, but I was feeling a lot better. And the very first person I saw when I got there was the nurse who saved my life when I went into cardiac arrest. And I just remember hugging each other, crying, and he looked over at me and he goes, Matt, this is the last day in the ICU room for me. I wasn't even supposed to be here today. They had to bring me in because somebody was sick. And I know for a fact that this is not like just some crazy coincidence. And today we still talk. I have social media, I have his phone number. And once again, it's just God bringing people into your life. This is what I would say too. If there's somebody in your life that is super important to you, and that is going to be there for you. For my example, Lauren, my parents too, and some other people, but really, Lauren we'll talk about, but there's somebody in your life that is going to be there for you no matter what, and you're taking them for granted, which a lot of us do, and I've done before too. I want you to take a step back today, reach out to them, and tell them how much you appreciate them in your life. Not only will it make a big difference in your day, it'll make a massive difference in their day as well. And I don't think we do that enough, to share how much love and appreciation we have for those people in our life that we know when shit hits the fan, they aren't leaving us. And I don't do it enough, I'll be honest, but I want to share it with people so that we can all work on this together. So that was kind of my journey of, changing my life around and things like that.
Yeah. I think that's a great piece of advice, and you're right. Appreciation we don't put enough of it out there. So, speaking of appreciation, you and Lauren, Man, did you guys have a weird first year of your relationship? Were you able to, once you had your diagnosis, were you able to date at all while you're in the hospital? Did you feel romance or intimacy at all? Was you and Lauren able to create moments that she felt like your girlfriend and you felt like her boyfriend?
Um, when I was going through chemo, yes, we were able to go on, like, we were able to enjoy some time. And the thing was, though, that grew so close was we learned how precious time was.
Hmm.
Because I was really fighting for my life at that point, and we didn't take many things for granted. When we wanted to go see a sunset on a beach, we would go to the beach, on our in Ohio, like the lake. We would, if we wanted to go on a date, we wouldn't worry about the money or anything like that. We would just go out and enjoy ourselves. And you know, that not only grew us closer, but it realized, um, you know, how precious our time is together, whether it's going to be short or long lived. And then when all the complications started happening, obviously that was really hard on my parents and her and other people as well. But after that, I would say it took a good 6 months, probably 6 to 8 months of me healing, mentally, physically, emotionally, all that, after the hospital, before we really started doing anything again. She was there for me all the time, but we couldn't really be boyfriend and girlfriend. And truthfully, I don't ever think we were able to, throughout a whole relationship for the first close to 2 years, we were never like truly able to be like an intimate couple. And then finally, for me, it took a full year for my wound to heal, because I told you it was an open wound and the skin had to grow back. It took a full year for that to heal. And then I would say it took another year for me to really gain my strength back, gain my mindset back. And after that, I really was like, I remember sitting down one day and I was like, what's my purpose in life? Like, what's next? 2 years goes by and it's like, I feel like there's something bigger. And it's like, I feel like there's something bigger with me and Lauren. I feel like there's something bigger with my career. I feel like there's a bigger impact. I feel like everything in my life has changed. And, sticking on the me and Lauren, we finally, after, I would say, honestly, 2 years of dating, we finally really got to know each other and really started to, not just like date, but more or less like become a true boyfriend and girlfriend. Now we've actually lived with each other for a year and a half now, actually.
Nice.
And so COVID's really brought us together. And it was a good test. Honestly, it was a really good test to say, hey, listen, if we're gonna live together, we want to get married, which hopefully is very soon. I just feel like we got to see how it is when actually living under the same roof, finances, all of these things. So not only did cancer bring us closer together, and unfortunately, I've talked to hundreds of cancer survivors and patients, and I would say it's 50-50. Half of them, they've grown so much stronger in their relationship, and the other half, unfortunately, the other partner or them they went separate ways. But I was so grateful to still have Lauren in my life.
And through those conversations that you had with people, do you feel like there was a difference between the 50 that made it and the 50 that unfortunately didn't make it? Was there something they did differently?
I think for the people who didn't make it, I would say let's cut that in half too. Half of them, for the cancers, survivors and cancer patients, they had a different direction in their life. Like for a lot of them, it was survivors who said, hey, I have a bigger purpose. I have a different direction in my life. And the significant other was so used to who they used to be that it just didn't mesh anymore. And their purpose was so much bigger that they're like, I'm not going to give up on what I know I need to do with my life. And if it takes a little sacrifice from our relationship and the other person can't handle that, then so be it. And on the other end, I would say the other 50% is the cancer, the person, the caregiver, it's a lot of burden. It really is. If I had Lauren on here, she would say, it's not easy. It's very mentally draining and everything. And, a lot of them can usually stick with it, but then for some of them, it just gets too hard or too difficult. And they might seem like a bad person for leaving, but if they're not emotionally and mentally and physically invested into the relationship, it's only going to hurt them even more. So that's what I found out on that end. And the one that's growing stronger, the more I talk to people, not only is the person who's gone through the experience stronger, but the caregiver is gone stronger too. So much stronger, because they're starting to realize that like there is so much more to life. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but you've seen these stories of like all these people going through crazy events and overcoming them. And then they're like, I don't want to go back to my 9-to-5 job for the rest of my life and then just come home and then just sit around. We have a bigger journey in our life, and a lot of them have kids too. So kids keep them. Kids are a massive part too. I don't have children yet, but eventually we want to have children and show them the power of doing things with their life that they want to, things like that. So there's so many avenues to this, man. But what I would say is, I've seen both ways, and I will say though, I've talked to a lot of people who their significant others left them. And I would say a lot of them said it was some of the best things that have ever happened, because in the beginning, their relationship might have not have been healthy anyways. It might have been an unhealthy relationship, and this was like that, kind of nail in the head of like, hey, listen, or nail in the coffin of like, hey, we need to separate and part ways. And some are not okay, but for the most part, I've seen a lot of people who have grown so much stronger and said it's one of the best things. And I'm actually, one of my good friends, he found his significant other after he got a divorce. Then he went through cancer, and then now he's dating somebody who's going through cancer, or now married to them. He's going through cancer, and he had already beat stage 4 prostate cancer. He's now dating and married to somebody, a woman who's going through stage 4 breast cancer, but they're the closest they've ever been together. And the relationship it's second to none. I can't even explain it. It's just so powerful what they're doing. So sometimes it's like meant to be, finding somebody else.
Yeah. Challenge, especially like being diagnosed with cancer, will, stress test the relationship, and the ones that are meant to be will stay together, and the ones that were not meant to be will walk their separate paths. So Matt, as before I ask my last question, you're doing a lot of great things. You teased out, finding your next purpose after you've overcome cancer. So I know you have a great Facebook group that would be amazing for our audience to know about. But tell us about that, and anywhere else that people can find you and connect with you if they want to learn a little bit more about you or say hi.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks. I appreciate that. So yes, I started a Facebook group back in just October. And we now have over 400 and almost close to 450 cancer survivors and patients in the group in a matter of about 2.5 months. It's just been mind-blowing. I'm so grateful, and to see the stories and see the people in there is just truly incredible. And the Facebook group is called Young Adult Cancer Facebook Group. Super simple. If you really want to get in, you can look that up, but you can just message me on either Instagram or Facebook. Facebook, it's just Matt Ode, Mattode, and Instagram is Mattyode. Either one, you can message me on there. I will happily get you into the group. If you've been impacted, this is for anybody who's been impacted by cancer. It can be a caregiver, it can be a patient, or it can be a survivor. And my whole entire objective with this group is to help you figure out what is the next step in my journey. How do I grow stronger in my relationships? How do I grow stronger in my faith? How do I go stronger in what I want to do with my life? And that's the biggest thing, is because when I was going through cancer and I finished cancer, like I told you, for 2 years, I had to regain control of my mental, physical, emotional health. And then I said, what is my purpose in life? And the only way I was able to do that was getting around the right people and having the right mentors to help me get to that direction. So I want to be that mentor. It's a very unique group, because this isn't just like a support group. It is a support group, don't get me wrong, but it's not just like every other support group. This is a group where I'm going to help you through your journey by sharing different videos, by mentoring you and helping you through this process. So that's my Facebook group. Would love to have you in it if you feel it's a good fit. And then second, if you are ever looking for a speaker or somebody on your podcast, You can message me through Instagrams, Facebook. I also have LinkedIn as well. It's Matt Ode. Or you can go on to my website, which is mattodespeaks.com. You can check that out as well. And that's my speaking website. If you're looking for a speaker, I'd be happy to talk through it with you and see, if it's a good fit.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links in the show notes for anybody that's looking for them, wants to join the Facebook group, or wants to connect to you about a speaking engagement. So this podcast is the Support Reports. We're all about supporting caregivers that are supporting people that are most closest to them in their life through cancer journey or anything else. So my final question to you, through your experience, what does great support look like?
Great support. I would say great support is everything. Without you cannot fight these battles alone. I'll tell you that right now. You will not fight the toughest battles of your life alone. Support. I would not be here today without it. I would not be here today without my friends. I would not be here today without my family, and I would not be here today without Lauren. And just remember, it's okay to ask for help, especially you men. I want to say this real quick. Women too, but mostly men, because I know how you are, and I was no different. It's okay to express with what you're going through. It's okay to share your most vulnerable parts of your life, because all people want to do is help you for the most part. So don't be afraid to ask for help, especially with the people that you know are going to be there for you. So that's my message for.
And if you were to channel your inner Lauren, what advice would she give caregivers that are currently going through the situation she went through?
Yeah, I would say you're going to have ups and down days for sure. But if you never give up and you just keep staying strong in your faith, you'll be amazed at the resilience and how much loving and caring you can be for somebody, and how much of a difference it makes in their life. For her, until I actually told her, I don't think she realized how much of a massive difference it was. Mm-hmm. And now she's able to share that with people and saying how much of a difference support is for people who are going through that tough time. So that's what I think she would say, is just stay strong. You're going to have up and down days, but the support and the love that you give is everything to the person who needs you.
Matt, I really appreciate you coming on the Support Report, sharing your story, sharing so much wisdom. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to staying connected with you.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate it.